Caseworkers are stretched thin, balancing high caseloads and endless paperwork. But with SpeakRight, documentation doesn't have to mean burnout. SpeakRight's Protective Services transcription cuts paperwork time dramatically, so you can meet deadlines, reduce overtime, and focus on what truly matters, the families you serve. With SpeakRight's free mobile app and desktop platform, caseworkers can capture detailed narratives anytime, anywhere, with just one tap to upload. SpeakRight is proven to lower stress and turnover, helping agencies retain dedicated staff while improving case quality. Don't let documentation slow you down. Let SpeakRight do the heavy lifting. Visit speakright.com/imprint to see how SpeakRight can transform your agency today. That's SpeakRight, SpeakWrite.com/imprint.
Hello and welcome to the Imprint Weekly Podcast. I'm John Kelly, Senior Editor of the Imprint, a daily news site covering child welfare and youth justice around the country. You can read all of our coverage at imprintnews.org and check us out on Facebook or Twitter at the Imprint News. You can sign up on our homepage for our free weekly and monthly newsletters. And for professionals in child welfare and youth justice, subscribe to our Youth Services Insider section for a closer look at news on business policy and practice. The Imprint Weekly Podcast is also a member of the SafeCamp Audio Network. Check out our show page and all of SafeCamp's other great podcasts at safecampaudio.org on the web, at SafeCamp Audio on social media. So I am flipping the usual rotation up. We usually do the headlines edition of the podcast on the first week of the month, but I'm going to do that next week. This week I have two great guest interviews for you. First, we're going to talk to Sacha Klein, professor and researcher at Michigan State University School of Social Work, about the nexus between Head Start and the realm of child welfare. Now, the context for this interview was actually that Head Start appeared to be in the crosshairs of the Trump administration. It still could be. The Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, let go several members of the Head Start staff and closed all of the Head Start regional offices. And there was a leaked budget document that had outlined plans for discretionary spending in fiscal 2026 that had $0 included for Head Start. There was also another list that started to circulate last week of potential grant terminations out of the Department of Health and Human Services around research grants, and that had a ton of Head Start research on it. But just before we began final edits and production on this episode, the Trump administration put out details around what's called a skinny budget, sort of like preview to the full budget proposal from the White House, which just laid out its plans for, big changes in increased discretionary spending or big cuts to it in some cases, in a lot of cases. And that's part of why I wanted to do the headlines edition of the podcast next week, because, I think we're going to get the full budget proposal this week, and I wanted to be able to talk through that in a timely way. So anyway, this skinny budget that came out on Friday afternoon does not include any mention of Head Start, which makes it seem that the program is not going to be proposed to be eliminated by the White House as was previously thought. We'll see what the actual final budget proposal looks like. Again, I think that probably will come out this week. And then what Congress does with the recommendations and asks of the Trump administration. But, I think it's still a good conversation to feature here, because this is Trump 2.0's first budget proposal. There will be more to come in future years, and obviously Head Start, while it may not be zeroed out this year, was at least pretty close to being zeroed out. And who knows what Congress will do with Head Start funding as we move here, but it certainly does look much more like Head Start is safely in the plans for federal spending in 2026 than it was when just a week ago I recorded this interview with Dr. Klein. So I brought her on because, while Head Start is an academic program at heart and serves 750,000 kids a year on an early learning basis, it's also a piece of the safety net, and she knows and has done some of the research on how it connects to family support, to employment, and to child safety. So after that, you will hear a quick conversation between me and several hosts of Young and Autonomous, which is the newest podcast on SafeCamp Audio. This is a 4-episode podcast by young parents with lived experience in foster care, where the hosts engage in meaningful conversations with peers, sex educators, and researchers about sexual and reproductive health information, rights, services, and resources. The four hosts and I talked on this podcast a little bit about just how the series came together, their own experiences with sexual and reproductive health while they were in the foster care system, and what they hope that people will get out of this series. So without further ado, let's get to our conversation on Head Start and child welfare with Sacha Klein. All right, Head Start is at its core an educational program. It's been around since the 60s, since the war on poverty began, meant to build the academic readiness and cognitive ability of kids in low-income families. I think it's served around 40 million kids thus far, about 250,000 every year. And it, seems to be in the crosshairs of the Trump administration, which has terminated quite a few staff at the Head Start regional offices, at least, and I think maybe some at the federal office as well. And then leaked details of a Department of Health and Human Service budget plan would suggest that the Trump administration is at least considering asking Congress to end funding for Head Start. So Sacha Klein, an associate professor, researcher at Michigan State's School of Social Work, joins us to talk about the program's history, track record on its focal element there, the academics, but also just the implications of this potential closure of Head Start on the social safety net. So Dr. Klein, thanks for joining us again on the weekly podcast as a return guest. How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me back.
I should probably have gone back and seen what favorite you recommended to the folks last time, but I'll make you do it again. Movie, TV show, book, musical group, or sports team. What do you got?
Last time I shared my favorite movie, which is the second Aliens movie.
Oh, yes.
Alien franchise, which, makes sense because it's at its core about like a very scrappy little child who's been through, trauma and all kinds of difficulty and found a way to survive. And ultimately, hopefully, you don't really see this part, but you would hope afterwards thrive.
So you're giving me that again, or you want to give us a news thing?
Oh, well, I'm not much of a sports person. I've been reading the Slow Horses series.
Oh, okay.
The Slough House, Slow Horses,
Yeah.
the espionage series about a group of spies in England who screw up and get put together in a team of screw ups, so to speak, and their adventures and misadventures in saving the world.
Totally. I was like through season 1 of the TV show they made of it. It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Gary Oldman, pretty good. Okay, so I think let's just not assume that everybody knows exactly what Head Start is and does, and just begin with the basics. What is Head Start?
So Head Start is, as you mentioned, it's really a comprehensive and multi-generational child development program. It was founded in 1965. And it is basically a program that serves children and families and pregnant women prenatal through age 5 across the entire country, including multiple territories, District of Columbia, et cetera, all 50 states. And it's known best as a preschool program for 3 and 4-year-olds, but it's a lot more than that. So it includes both Head Start, what they call traditional Head Start, which is the 3 and 4-year-olds, and then early Head Start, which is prenatal through age 2. So those are the infants and toddlers and expectant families. And in addition to providing early learning for young children, it provides linkages for families to a whole host of other kinds of services. So it helps ensure that families get health care and even helps families find health insurance when that's an issue.
How does it do that? How does that work?
It basically through a case management function. So they have staff, family support staff as part of the program, and it's implemented locally. So one of the things that is kind of, I won't say 100% unique, but unusual about Head Start when you look at it compared to other early childhood development programs, is it has a long track record of hiring parents. So a lot of parents also end up being connected to employment and wages in a way that they weren't before through Head Start and start out kind of on a career path. And some of them get hired to be family support workers who link other families to needed support services in the community, including housing, mental health services, really comprehensive range of social supports.
Right on. We'll get back to that aspect of it in a minute here. But let's stick with kind of what Head Start is there at its core to do. So, the idea is to get you ready for your academic career, both in elementary school and then going on to middle school and high school. It's been around for many decades now. I believe in like the late 90s was when they started the federal government funded some fairly long trail impact studies
Mm.
to get at, is Head Start working? Which is a big bloated question, right? Like, working against what?
Right.
Working compared to what? On what metrics? So I don't want you to spend an hour. I feel like you probably could, laying out everything that's been found there. But just what would you say is a candid assessment of Head Start's track record thus far in its history?
Sure. Well, if you focus on the national impact study, and the reason that people focus on that is because it was a randomized controlled trial. So in the world of researchers, that's sort of the gold standard, right? It
Yeah.
means that you can be fairly confident that the outcomes you're observing were actually caused by
Right.
participation in the program. And so it found some positive impacts, particularly for vulnerable families. But there was quite a bit of controversy when the evaluation came out, because while it did find evidence of sort of positive school readiness outcomes, back to that kind of child development, academic sort of core goal of the program, it found that they were short lived. So they found evidence of positive impacts in year one, but by year two, those had, in a sense, faded. So that caused quite a bit of controversy. But I will say, as a researcher, there's a lot of reason to kind of take that interpretation of the findings with a grain of salt. And the biggest issue is that the study suffered from what we would call a contaminated control group, right? Which means that you have a group of families who are randomly assigned either to get Head Start or not get Head Start, right? And the problem design wise with that study was that the families that didn't get Head Start, a significant percentage of them went and got other very similar services to Head Start. So they went to state preschool programs, et cetera, that may have not have been identical to Head Start, but that offered a lot of the same services. And so that means that when you find that effects fade, it's no longer telling you that Head Start stops working in year two compared to not getting Head Start. It's telling you that the effects disappear in year two relative to some mixture of families getting very similar service.
Would it be safe to say that researchers have taken that data and done further study on this? That, I don't want to summarize it incorrectly, so just check me here. That when you compare the impact of Head Start on children who did not go anywhere to get early childhood, so really were just sort of in the home till they hit preschool, there was a much more pronounced, cognitive impact.
Yeah,
But
they
when
were
you
able to
compare it
kind of
against,
piece that out a little bit
yeah,
better. Yeah, there's evidence of that. The other thing I would say is, I think as a society, we have to think about what are reasonable expectations for standalone social programs. So you're talking about a program that was designed for not just low income, but impoverished families and families with children with disabilities, children in foster care. And as a society, I think if we want to support families, then we want to build a scaffolding of multiple social programs and policies that help level the playing field for kids who are born into poverty and other kinds of circumstances. So I also think there's a reasonable question of, if you get 1 or 2 years of a program like Head Start, but you stay in your same impoverished community and you go to the schools then in that same impoverished community, is it reasonable to expect that Head Start on its own is going to sort of be a silver bullet that completely erases all these other factors that impact young people's learning? So there's also kind of a contextual piece to consider.
and then I think another thing that really needs to be kind of recognized as we seem to be headed towards the potential for debating the relevancy, the continuation of Head Start here, is, yes, its primary function is to educate kids or to develop their cognitive abilities so that they can learn better later. Can you talk a little bit just about what it means to parents? I mean, you pointed out some parents actually gain employment through it, but what does it represent beyond just a place to learn for kids, and the network of particularly low income families that would be eligible for it?
Yeah. Well, that's the area that my research is focused more on, and that I think is sort of fascinating because regardless of what it was originally created to do, what we've learned is that it does a lot more than just that child development piece. We can debate that one piece, but there is really quite mounting evidence that it is an essential support program, not just for children, but for parents and for the broader community. It has positive impacts on other parents, not just parents who are participating in the program, to the local economies where programs are located, et cetera. So I tend to, most of my research is around child abuse and child abuse prevention. I'll mention two research studies that I think really speak to the potential of Head Start programs to not just help children be ready to go to school, but that these are programs that help parents show up for their kids in ways that they might not have been able to otherwise, and that they actually are child abuse prevention programs, amongst other things. So first, I'll mention Beth Green and some of her colleagues were able to follow up on the early Head Start impact study, which, like the one we mentioned earlier, was a randomized control study. They looked at the long-term child welfare involvement of the kids in that study, the families in that study that got Head Start, and those in the control group. And they were able to find evidence that at least up until the age of 14, there were some kind of interesting patterns around kind of time, but basically the headline finding was that there was less child welfare involvement in the end, or child welfare contact for those families that participated in Head Start, which is particularly powerful when you consider the fact that Head Start is potentially a surveillance system for families, right?
I was going to say, I would imagine everybody at a Head Start is essentially a mandated reporter in most states, if not all.
Yeah, in most states, everybody or most of the people working in a Head Start program are mandated to report suspected child maltreatment, which means that participating in Head Start could increase your likelihood of getting reported for suspected child maltreatment. And what they found was that by age 14, the opposite had happened. So there's every chance that the effects that they found in their study were more modest than they were in reality in terms of preventing child maltreatment.
Yeah, and you've done your own research on that in the Head Start tranche, right? Like,
Yeah, focused on foster care
uh,
outcomes. So it was not a experimentally designed study, but we used a nationally representative sample of families in the child welfare system, both those in foster care and those who were supervised by the child welfare system but staying at home, and looked at sort of outcomes for those who had access to different kinds of early care and education services. These are families, we focused on the families with kids 0 to 5 years old. And what we found is specifically for families in the child welfare system who got Head Start services. So, and this is, we did not find this for other kinds of early care and education, but just for Head Start services, they were 93% less likely to end up with their child being put in foster care, which has huge implications in terms of, keeping families together, in terms of just the human suffering element of not avoiding getting even more deeply mired in the child welfare system. But just at a kind of very pragmatic level, foster care is extraordinarily expensive to taxpayers. And so if we are eliminating a program that has, and there's evidence in other ways too, not just with respect to foster care, that Head Start actually saves taxpayers' dollars over time. It's potentially very short-sighted in terms of the economic health and well-being of the country.
I remember talking to you about the study that you did, and at the time, it was right. It was just a very small number of of kids, but that big result, that 93% less likely, and you basically being like, yes, it's small, but first, it's kind of hard to get a statistically significant result in such a small thing. So big deal. We should continue to look at this. Have you been able to? I know you have lots of things that you do. You're a tenured professor. You got kids to teach, but
I
have we gone
haven't
beyond that first
I
research?
have not specifically followed up on the Head
Mm,
Start piece. So we've done some similar research on other kinds of social programs that seem to be linked to reductions in child welfare system involvement and
okay.
foster care involvement, like paid family leave, certain kinds of TANF, things like that, but that they
Yeah.
can be protective also. But I have not
Yeah.
turned back to Head Start, which I am now kicking myself for.
Today's episode is powered by Listen, a groundbreaking AI platform transforming how child welfare and other public sector providers learn and grow. Imagine being able to roll out comprehensive, secure training and quality monitoring across your entire organization instantly. That's exactly what Listen delivers to over 70 public and private sector clients. Developed by PhD academic psychologists, Listen helps health and human services agencies master motivational interviewing and other evidence-based practices. And this isn't just another training tool. It's backed by 16 years of rigorous research and peer-reviewed studies. To learn more, visit listen.io. That's lyssn.io. lyssn.io. Or follow the link in the show notes.
What are your thoughts on just a more blunt assessment of the family factor of Head Start here? So as I said at the top, we're talking about 750,000 kids every year that are participating in this. They're participating during the day, which means this is the thing that 750,000 kids are doing while a lot of their parents work or go and do something during the day. So I have no idea, maybe you do, what percentage of those 750,000 kids' parents are employed and working during the day. But it kind of seems important to recognize that Head Start is childcare also. And so we're talking about
Yes.
if you're going to get rid of it, if you were actually going to get rid of it, there's a I think you need to factor in that is 750,000 childcare slots that just got evaporated into the ether, right?
Absolutely. And it's actually more dire than that. So Head Start is primary source of childcare for most of those families that you mentioned. It is often the only childcare that is available in rural communities. And there are a number of nonprofits and community-based programs that cobble together. They provide both Head Start or early Head Start, but they provide other kinds of childcare services to families. And this country is in the middle of a childcare crisis where there's nowhere near enough supply as there is demand. And that has to do with the economics of childcare. But one of the things that is a very real and present danger with eliminating Head Start is that it provided funding to these larger childcare providers that allowed them to stay liquid, basically, and it is allowing them to stay liquid. And if the Head Start funding is eliminated, there's every chance that they will not only have to close their Head Start classrooms, but they will no longer be able to fund many of their other classrooms and programs. And I think it's quite likely that we will see that already inadequate supply shrink even further. And I know, as an example here in the state of Michigan, where I'm from, there's data from just a couple of years ago that we had basically somewhere between 57 and 59,000 parents just in the state of Michigan who reported having to leave, quit, or change a job because they didn't have access to childcare.
Yeah.
So this would have huge impacts on them. And then the other thing to remember is that Head Start employs, I think it's like around 260,000 people in this country as as staff and as contractors. So those folks are also going to have to deal with job loss. And what we're likely to see more and more pressure on other child care programs we have, like subsidized or CCDF programs or subsidized child care programs, which are already being stretched way too thin. And the impact on the local communities' economies, because the dollars for Head Start, basically almost all of them go directly into the local community, right? And not only in terms of wages, but in terms of supplies and all that other kind of stuff. So I think the economic consequences would be really far reaching.
I'm glad you brought that up because I think, I started with a question about, the what does Head Start represent to a family beyond just academics for the kid. So if you just think of like what I was talking about and then what you were just talking about, as almost just picture people's lives or organizations as like Jenga. You take childcare away from a
Yep.
working parent, you're pulling the one at the bottom. Like they're thinking, like, to your point of, okay, how am I going to stay in this job? Do I have to leave this job? Now maybe some are able to find something else. Certainly a lot of people would find another way, but there will be others that will be really challenged to do that, as you say, especially in rural areas. Now you move to the organizations, and I think even myself, I probably tend to think when you say your local Head Start, you think like there's a building with an organization that's called this place's Head Start, and that's what they do and only what they do. But
Mhm.
and there probably are some just like exclusively Head Start providers. I'm not saying there aren't, but I think it's more common what you're saying.
Yep.
They have a Head Start program. They have another program that they do. They have an after school program. There's people filled in once you've
Right.
got that physical space. And so if your mentality is like, well, okay, we're taking away 100 Head Start slots here, but there's that place still has 200 others. No, because when you take that Jenga piece of the Head Start out, you're saying, if I'm understanding you right, the thing comes down. It
Yep.
does not work. Like the financing is just not that clean in the nonprofit world, where it's like, well, we
Yeah.
lost that
And
100, but we still got these 300. That's the likelihood is they will all go. You know,
the U.S. Office of Child Care put out an update to their childcare rules last year, and in that document reported that the average profit margin of a childcare provider in the United States is 1%. Like,
as thin as it gets.
there's no room. So what I suspect a lot of people may not understand is that eliminating Head Start would not only be disastrous for the low-income families that use that program, it would also affect middle-income America. We don't have enough childcare available as it is. Families are waiting ridiculous amounts of time and paying obscene amounts of money to get their kids into childcare. And without the revenue that Head Start provides to childcare providers for those classrooms, many providers are going to have to shut down other classrooms as well that serve, you know, more families.
What would you do, just to bring it back to the original point here? So, obviously, anybody who would be in favor of zeroing Head Start out has to be doing that thinking along the lines that the impact, what we're getting back, the return on investment is not good enough. Now, what we've been talking about, I think that needs to be factored in. Whether you think it can be improved on or not, don't just assume that in absolute terms. There's other
Right.
implications of getting rid of something that's serving 750,000 kids in the country. Now, but
There is a
yeah,
study, John. There is an existing cost effectiveness study that I don't even think it includes the child maltreatment savings. And it concluded that for every dollar we put into a Head Start program, that we save $7 to $10.
I'll find that and post that in the show notes for people that want to read it. That's a very compelling ROI. What I was going to ask you, just to wrap up here, is you've been around Head Start a long time studying it. What are your sort of thoughts on what we could do to make Head Start stronger, both in how it develops kids, or even if it's not about academics, other things you'd like to see, worked into that Head Start milieu?
Yeah. Since its creation, I think the commitment to and Head Start being a pathway out of poverty for parents has ebbed and flowed at different times in the program's history. But one thing we know with great certainty, and certainly in the child welfare field, is that children thrive when their parents thrive. And so, what makes Head Start unique, and what I would want to see even more of, is this focus on providing opportunities to parents to engage in leadership development, to build community, and have the opportunities to move into not just a job, but a career path. Head Start supports self-sufficiency, amongst other things, for families. It has had bipartisan support for decades because not only is it good for kids and families in the immediate sense, but it creates a pathway out of poverty, not just a handout. And in particular, when the services and the programs are focused on the parents as the kids, does that. And that ends up being a win-win for everyone, including the taxpayer.
Sacha Klein, Michigan State University School of Social Work. Thank you for joining us on the Imprint Weekly Podcast.
Thank you, John.
All right, when we come back, our conversation with the hosts of Young and Autonomous.
Are you a professional in the field of child welfare, juvenile justice, or other family and youth services? Subscribe today to Youth Services Insider, the Imprint's exclusive section on all the insider news you need to stay in the know. Funding opportunities, major federal and state policy shifts, interviews with key leaders in the field. It's all available only for our Youth Services Insider subscribers. Sign up for a monthly or yearly subscription today by visiting imprintnews.org/subscribe. Our podcast listeners get 10% off their subscription by entering the promo code podcast10. That's imprintnews.org/subscribe and get 10% off your subscription by entering the promo code podcast10 today.
All right, we have a new podcast coming to the SafeCamp audio network. Young and Autonomous is a limited series podcast centering the voices of young parents with lived experience in foster care as they engage in meaningful conversations about sexual and reproductive health information, services, and resources. Joining me today to introduce this upcoming series are some of the young people you are going to hear in it. We have Emma Johnson from Nebraska. We have Sano Zukapuzzi from Atlanta, Georgia. We have Blanca Gertz from Rhode Island. And we have Azar Webb from Nebraska. Guys, thanks for jumping on the Imprint Weekly Podcast with me. So let's get these guys to know you a little bit before we start asking questions about your own show. House rules here on the Imprint Weekly Podcast. Every guest has to give me one of their favorites. Here are the categories for you: TV show or movie, book, musical group, or sports team. I'll call you guys out and you can give them to me. So Emma, why don't we start with you? What do you got for the people?
Oh my goodness. Waist Deep is a great movie. I don't know if it's a favorite or like Green Mile. Can I pick two? Waist Deep and Green Mile. Favorite movies.
Waist Deep and Green Mile. You get two for the price of one from Emma. Stano, what do you got for us?
I would say my favorite movie has to be Dead Poet Society. I don't know. Ever since I watched that movie, I was very inspired by it. The Carpe Diem, that always stuck with me. Seize the Day.
Love that. Seize the
I
Day.
thought Robin Williams did a great job. Oh, Captain, my Captain. That was phenomenal.
Good stuff. Blanca, give him a favorite.
I'm going to go with favorite sports team since everyone's gone with favorite movie. And I got to say, shout out to the Kansas City Chiefs.
Azar, round us out. What do you got for the people? Give them a favorite.
Not Kansas City Chiefs. But that's fine. I still love Blanca after that sour taste she just left in my mouth. I'm gonna go with my favorite movie. And everybody love it because you got a friend in me. So Toy Story. Classic.
Love it. So you got three movies there and the Kansas City Chiefs. All right, guys, who wants to tell everybody how this whole podcast came together? My understanding is you guys have been working on this for almost a year, maybe even more than a year now. So how did it all come together? How did you all get involved?
The way that the idea initially started was we had started hearing about all the changes that were going on in legislation. Roe v. Wade had just been overturned. And I had brought up to the group, like, what do we want to do to get resources out to young people who might not have it easily available? And initially we played with a lot of different ideas of getting this information out, in different ways. And then we went from, okay, well, do we want to specifically focus on just young people? Do we want to do this like as a general audience kind of situation? After loads of conversation and kind of like eliminating ideas and bringing on new ideas and stuff like that, it kind of morphed into this idea of doing a podcast where we would choose these 4 topics that were very important for us to highlight and be able to bring to audiences to listen. We offer various perspectives and things of that nature and resources so that whoever is listening to it can be able to make the best decisions for their own sexual and reproductive health.
And let's talk a little bit about what people can expect from this podcast and like what these 4 episodes are going to be about in a second. But before that, I just want to open this up to any of you guys to share. I'm sure you guys all had your own different, personal experiences in foster care with child welfare systems. What was your own experience like in terms of getting information about sexual health, about your rights, about parenting and things like that?
I can start with that one. I think mine, I just had such limited knowledge because before foster care, my mom, like, she signed me out of all the human growth and development classes. And so there was just no knowledge. So what I learned from peers, which was just never like not
So
great because we were all still trying to
your
figure
mom
ourselves
actually
out.
like selected out.
Yeah, she didn't feel like the school should teach me. And I guess maybe she thought she'd teach me when I got older. And obviously that never happened. And so went to foster care at a young age. And then the foster parents just never also took the time to teach me about like just my own body and like my development and honestly just some of the basics really. And so I think that's where my passion came in for this podcast, is because there's so much misinformation and just lack of knowledge out there for people depending on how you grew up and your foster care experience. And so it's nice to be able to kind of give that information to people.
Yeah. Azar, what was your experience like with these issues while you were there?
So I have older siblings. So I would ask them questions on certain things that I was comfortable with. Other times I read about it online or I read it from a book. I actually opted out of it too in high school. But in middle school, I learned about it a lot. So I felt like I had decent knowledge on it. But one thing that I liked about in middle school is, which they don't do today, is I watched Degrassi. And Degrassi showed me a lot of like everyday life things that was going on that I didn't see in middle school, but I seen it in high school when it came to sexual reproductive health. And I think it was good to have that exposure at a young age to a show like that because of, I mean, the mass production of it and how many series it has. But 9 times out of 10, I was either figuring it out on my own, and at that little 10%, I was asking my siblings, like I said, because there's 8 of us and there's 4 older than me. Or, I mean, a lot of my friends were just sexually active, in middle school or high school. And so I guess I had that little bit of knowledge, but I didn't trust everything that someone told me. And then as far as providers, I was kind of like on asking questions because I didn't want to tell a stranger my business. So again, it was a toss up for me, or I just figured it out on my own.
Right. We had one of our reporters here at the Imprint do a kind of like a deep dive into looking at policies from all these different states about what were child welfare agencies or schools or whoever, what was everybody's kind of responsibility when it came to this issue with young people who were in the system. And what we found was really a lot of uncertainty and kind of an assumption that from one part of the system that another part of the system was doing that. Did that resonate with you guys? Like, did it feel like no one really, your caseworker, your school, your teachers, your guidance counselor, like nobody really had like the responsibility of making sure that you guys had the information you needed? So I haven't talked to you yet, so let me start with you. Does that resonate with you? What was your experience like? Did it feel disjointed like that?
Yeah, so I know for me, with my experience, I grew up in a religious family before I, came to foster care. So all those topics were like very taboo. So I couldn't, get those information on my own and things like that. So it was coming into school and things like that and finding out those information from your friends. And they give you, I guess, he say, she say, like information that they hear from, their parents, whoever they're maybe hearing information from. Things were very just not very credible and things like that. Not all of the information were very credible and things like that. And being a young man at the time, kind of like what Azar was saying, I couldn't really trust, some of that information. I had to go and figure those things out on my own and learn very hard lessons and things like, learning into becoming a father was one of those lessons that I had learned from, not taking advice or just not being properly educated on the topic as a young man and how to safeguard myself from those early signs and onsets of, what is led into of not having a very good education on sexual and reproductive health.
Who would you say as a father now, like has been the best adults in your life in terms of just helping you with that?
Who would I say is an adult? I kind of still struggle with that too, with sharing my personal business and things like that. But
Yeah.
I think I have, as I get older, there's more of a maturity with my age group of people who we've, experienced having children and things like that now. So it'll probably be in my peer group more than it would be in like, adults and things
Yeah.
like that. I don't know.
Azar, you said similar. You yourself and I not looking to anybody for advice on being a father, huh?
For me, I didn't get my father until I was 19, and I have a son who's 6. So I'm learning every day, right, to be a father to him. And then I have a daughter who's 1, and just being present for both of my children. But my son, more or less, it's an obstacle because I'm learning every single day with him. He lives with me. I'm a full-time father. I'm, to him, and it's everything is something new, right? It's me learning from him learning from me,
Yeah.
me seeing him inside of me, and doing things that I did that sometimes I might get upset if I'm like, oh wait, I can't get upset because I did that. And so just the principle of learning, everything is a learning curve and cycle as a man and as a father, and just trying to be great and be present, which is hard because sometimes it's not allowed, and focusing on your child and putting their needs first before yours. And I live through him, not in that mannerism, but in a mannerism of like, I wish I still have my innocence that he has. I wish that I could have smiled and not have to be an adult at a young age. I had to wash dishes, feed my other siblings. I didn't have time to watch my favorite cartoon show. So just kind of like cherishing that moment of when we watching movies or playing Pokemon or watching Looney Tunes together, and we laugh together, and it's genuine. It's something that I can do and enjoy.
Yeah.
I wanted to lift it up because I feel like it's so important, or at least for like when I was still in care. You had asked about like the responsibility, right? Like whose job is it to teach? Like really a lot of things for adolescents in care. And personally, I think it's so easy for no one to have that as a job because we're not, or at least I was, someone told me if y'all were, I was never told like, okay, this is a responsibility of your foster parent. This is a responsibility of this provider, this caregiver, this adult in your life. So I think it's just very easy for those things to kind of fall under the radar, or for it to be like, oh, like that was that Spider-Man thing where like pointing to everybody else. Like, that's your job. No, that's your job. Like
that's exactly what I was thinking of. That
yeah.
You call that exactly the Spider-Man meme for sure.
Right. So
sure.
I just think that I just wanted to lift that up because I think that's important to note that if no one's given the responsibility, then it's very easy to be like, oh, well, that wasn't mine to do, and like not take blame in that.
So, into this uncertainty comes your guys' podcast, and who can talk a little bit about just what listeners should expect to hear? What are the topics in these 4 episodes that they're going to get out of it?
I'll just kind of speak on one, and then if y'all want to do another one, I know that we go into knowing your rights and knowing how to navigate the system as far as it goes with like medical providers and what information you should be, share willingly, and what information maybe you don't want to share because everyone is like a mandatory reporter. Maybe not want to share, but maybe just be a little bit more cautious with. We talk about kind of like some of the uncertainty that people have had with certain medical providers and where that should be a safe space, but for a lot of people it's not. So where do you go for those sorts of things? Because really you should be able to ask your doctor, providing your doctor about anything going on with you medically or developmentally. And so I really enjoyed that one, and it was just really good conversation. And then obviously some knowledge that was brought as far as like different resources nationwide.
And I believe one of the full episodes is dedicated entirely to fathers. So, Sano and Azar, what did you guys talk about? I'm assuming both of you had some influence on that episode.
We were really just having a raw discussion about, becoming fathers at young ages and basically answering those questions, who we felt at the time were responsible for, guiding us through those early stages of young fatherhood, and things like going through like the process of after the child is here, what responsibilities that we're responsible for and things like that. Just having a very open and honest conversation from how the world perceives our role in our children's lives as young fathers, especially as young fathers who are coming from the disadvantaged backgrounds and the stigmas and stereotypes that follow us, and just talking about how we were able to manage to escape those stigmas and stereotypes and do better for our children.
So obviously one target group for this show is young people who are experiencing foster care now, or maybe have in the recent past. Who else do you guys hope will really hear what you guys are saying in these episodes and take it to heart? Who else other than, your peers do you hope get this content that you've put out?
Honestly, I know especially for the voices of young fathers, I would hope that young men who may not even be experiencing foster care or have had experience with that, just young men who would like to see what it's like on the other side of having children and the importance of, getting the sexual and reproductive education and things like that. Just in general, if you're thinking about having children, if, you never considered it, if sexual reproduction and things like that are something you never, considered, any young man that this information that can get across to, or people who have, especially young dads who have children who just want to hear a perspective that's not what's being, I guess, circulated around the internet and algorithm, where there's more topics supporting mothers and things like that, but just supportive of the father's perspective of things. That would be for the episodes that are with the young fathers. But everything else, I would say pretty much any young person who needs any education on sexual and reproductive health should tune in onto these conversations for real.
I would say also service providers, whether that be adult supporters, social workers, mentors, doctors, teachers, foster parents, really anyone that has a hand in steering young people in any type of direction. It's super important that they get this information and be able to also disseminate that information to the young people that they work with or serve, because we want to make sure that they understand how things can be seen from different perspectives, how they can help break certain stigmas and things like that, and how to provide care or information without judgment, right? So I think those would be, for me anyway, like the important people to also grasp this information.
Thank you, guys. The show is called Young and Autonomous. It's a 4-episode podcast coming to you on SafeCamp Audio. So check that out on SafeCamp Audio. Emma Johnson, Sano Zukapuzzi, Blanca Gertz, Azar Webb. Thank you guys for joining us on the Imprint Weekly Podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to Sacha Klein of Michigan State University School of Social Work and to the hosts of Young and Autonomous for joining us today. And thank you to SpeakRight for serving as this episode's lead sponsor. The Imprint Weekly Podcast is a production of the SafeCamp Audio Network, which is a division of Fostering Media Connections. Please visit safecampaudio.org on the web or at SafeCamp Audio on all major social media. This podcast is produced and mixed by Christine Onjoko with music by Luke Giroux and Cyrus Elliott. If you enjoyed this episode, we would love it if you'd consider subscribing or giving us a 5-star rating on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcasts. And we greatly appreciate if you consider supporting our work here on the podcast and in print. Small donations from our listeners and readers go a long way towards helping us grow and cover more great stories in child welfare and youth justice. To support us, it is super easy. Just visit imprintnews.org/donate. You can follow The Imprint on Twitter and Facebook by searching the handle @TheImprintNews and visit us on the web at imprintnews.org. You can always reach us over email at tips@imprintnews.org. I'm John Kelly, and we'll see you next week.